Good day, everyone. I am Mac Andrew M. Solano II, student of PhD ITI 620 Advanced Statistics. Now we're going to discuss about correlation and regression. So we have a sample data set with two independent variables, the self-efficacy and motivation, and we will determine if it has direct influence as one on the dependent variables teaching effectiveness and as individual predictors. So to do this, we're going to open the data using JASP. So the data is already encoded. So let us open it. Browse. Here is the data. So we can see that there are three variables. One is the self-efficacy, motivation, then effectiveness in teaching. So the self-efficacy and motivation are the predictors or the independent variables, and the effectiveness in teaching is the dependent variables. First is that we're going to check on the descriptives of the data in order to see the mean and the standard deviation. So we're going to click on descriptives, and we will add all these variables to the variables here on the other side. And under statistics, we click only standard deviation and the mean. So we have now the descriptive statistics. Now next is that we're going to go to correlations. So we will first insert the dependent variable, then followed by the independent variables. So here we go to correlation, regression, correlation, then click on effectiveness first, and then on the other variables. Using this table, we will going to find out if there is a multi-collinearity among the independent variables. So as you can see here in the person's correlations, the self-efficacy has a value of 0.92 and the motivation is 0.248. So these are lower compared to the value which is 0.70. So which means that there is no danger of multi-collinearity. So next is that we'll go to the linear regression. So click on regression, then linear regression. So now we add the dependent variables on the dependent variables. Our dependent variable is effectiveness in teaching, and our dependent variables are self-efficacy and motivation. So we will put it on the covariates. There. So next is we will use linear regression using the three variables and to check if there is an influence to the dependent variables with the independent variables as one and as individual. But before that, we will look at first the tables, and we will disregard the null hypothesis and consider only the alternative hypothesis. So we click on the linear regression, correct regression and linear regression. Then we use the effective in teaching as dependent variable. So this is our dependent variable. We click on the regression and linear regression. Then our dependent variable is effectiveness in teaching, and our independent variables are self-efficacy and motivation, and it is also called as covariates. So as you can see at the right side, we have the model summary for linear regression, ANOVA, and the coefficients. Now in the model summary for the effectiveness in teaching, we can see that there are model r squared, and then the r adjusted r squared. But here, and we have also the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. But here, we will not consider, or we will discard the null hypothesis. So which means that uh, we will discard this one, and we will only consider this one. We will only consider this one, the alternative hypothesis. As we can see here, on the alternative hypothesis, we have the r and the r squared, and we have the adjusted r squared. Now here, the adjusted r squared actually is the one that we're going to use, and this means that if we're going to multiply this into 100%, then we have 5.5% is the variance of effective in teaching that could be explained by the two variables, which is self-efficacy and motivation. So there is only 5.5%. Anxiety, there is 85.5% of variance in the effectiveness in teaching that can be explained by other variables that are not explored in this study. Next is that we're going to determine if there is an influence combining the covariates or the independent variables. So if they are combined, is there a significant influence to the effectiveness in teaching? The two combined independent variables or predictors, the self-efficacy and motivation, can be measured by the use of ANOVA with its p-value. So the p-value is 0.018, and this means that the p-value is lesser than 0.05, and we can say that there is a significant influence in the combination of self-efficacy and motivation predictors. So the combined p-value, or the combined influence of self-efficacy and motivation independent variables is equivalent to 0.018, which indicates that there is a significant influence by the two combined. And this value, the 0.018, is less than 0.05. So because it is less than 0.05, then it supports that the combined influence of the independent variables, self-efficacy and motivation towards anxiety, of self-efficacy and motivation towards effectiveness in teaching is significant. The next is we're going to look at the unique contribution of each of these variables. So the self-efficacy and the motivation. So by using the coefficients here, you still discard the HO, and we will use only this one, the alternative hypothesis. So next is we're going to look at the unique contribution of each of these variables, the self-efficacy and motivation. So the table that we're going to use is the coefficients in the model. Here we disregard this one, the H0 or the null hypothesis, and we will consider only the alternative hypothesis. So as we can see here, the p-value of the self-efficacy is 0.778, which indicates that there is no significant influence to the effectiveness in teaching. So self-efficacy has no influence on the effectiveness in teaching. And the motivation has 0.008, which indicates strong influence in the effectiveness in teaching. But if we combine them, then there is a strong influence in the effectiveness in teaching. So also the influence is positive, which means that if there is an increase in the motivation, there is also an increase in the effectiveness in teaching. Thank you very much for listening, and good day.